Hi, welcome back to Legal Lessons. My name is Tari. In this week's video, we're going to discuss one of my favorite legal doctrines with a pretty memorable name. It's called the Felony Murder Rule. I remember first learning the Felony Murder Rule in law school and feeling a mixture of emotions. I felt agreement, sometimes I felt disagreement, and sometimes I felt shocked with the way the rule applied to the facts and led to certain outcomes. Let's just say at that time in law school, I was very criminal defense minded. And so this rule made me feel a type of way. Felony murder rule is one of those unique exceptions to the normal rules of homicide. Normally, a defendant can only be convicted of murder if a prosecutor proves that that person acted either with the intent to kill or with reckless indifference for human life. The difference here is that under the felony murder rule, a defendant can be guilty of murder even if they acted without the intent to kill or without reckless disregard for human life. In order to be found guilty under felony murder rule, the prosecutor only needs to show that the defendant participated in a certain type of felony and that a fatality occurred. So this week's legal lesson is on felony murder rule. The felony murder rule is a rule that allows the defendant to be charged with first-degree murder for a death that occurs during the commission of a felony, even if that person is not the killer. What do I mean by the defendant is not the killer? I mean that even if the defendant is not himself the trigger man, right? He can still, under the felony murder rule theory, be found guilty of first-degree murder. Disclaimer is that each state has their own individual laws that may vary from state to state. But for the most part, under the felony murder rule theory, the defendant does not actually have to be the person to cause the death, or they don't even have to intend the death in order to be found guilty of first-degree murder under this theory. Now, the felony murder rule kicks in and applies to felonies or those type of crimes that are considered inherently dangerous. The rationale behind the felony murder rule is that certain type of crimes and conduct is so dangerous that as a society, we want to dissuade anyone from participating in it. So if you are participating in any type of these inherently dangerous felonies, it is justification for you to be charged with first-degree murder for any deaths that may result. So when someone participates in an inherently dangerous felony, they are responsible for any fatalities, even unexpected ones, that occur as a result of that felony, even if someone else causes the actual death of the person. The list of inherently dangerous felonies may vary from state to state, but for the most part, each state basically includes the BARC crimes. Now, BARC is a mnemonic device or a way for us lawyers to remember the elements that make up inherently dangerous felonies. The felonies that make up the BARC mnemonic are burglary, arson, robbery, rape, and kidnapping. BARRK, BARC. Now, as I stated a little earlier, sometimes the application of the felony murder rule can have very surprising outcomes. For example, a kid sets a fire to a car because they're upset. That fire spreads to a neighboring house, kills everyone on the block. The kid is now, under the felony murder rule, able to be charged with first-degree murder and will likely be found to be guilty because they were in the commission of an inherently dangerous felony, which is arson, starting the fire to the car. Now, this may come as a shock to some because, again, the person did not intend to cause the death of anyone, just the destruction of the car. But because they're involved in that inherently dangerous felony, the law is going to hold them responsible for the deaths that occur as a result of them doing the action. Now, to take a look at the felony murder rule in action and see it up close, we're going to take a look at or talk about the case of Greg McMichael, Travis McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan, who were all recently convicted of first-degree murder for the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. The three men were recently found guilty for their role in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, who was a 25-year-old black man who was killed while jogging through their neighborhood in Georgia, Scintilla Shores, back in February of 2020. For the benefit of anyone who may not be familiar with the tragic facts of Ahmaud's death, I'm going to go into a brief overview of the facts. Ahmaud was jogging through Scintilla Shores, a neighborhood in Glenn County, Georgia, when Travis and Greg McMichael, father and son, spotted him jogging down the street. They then got inside of their pickup trucks, assuming that he had committed a crime, and followed him. Shortly thereafter, their neighbor and friend, William Roddy Bryan, spotted them following Ahmaud and got in his pickup truck and joined the chase. Prosecutors at the trial say that this pursuit lasted about 5 minutes, which ultimately ended in Travis McMichael, the son, exiting the pickup truck with a shotgun and fatally shooting Ahmaud Arbery multiple times. This case came into national spotlight only after authorities took over 10 weeks to arrest anybody for this crime. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for the video that was recorded by one of the defendants, Roddy Bryan, we probably would never even know about this today. As a matter of fact, the former DA, which is the prosecutor who decides whether or not to charge, Jackie Johnson, she is currently charged with obstruction of justice for her role in trying to cover up this entire incident. Now, if you like a video on Jackie Johnson and exactly what happened there, her obstruction of justice, and what prosecutorial discretion even is, let me know in the comments, and that can come in a later legal lesson. But for this video, we'll move on. Father and son, Greg and Travis McMichael, along with their friend, William Roddy Bryan, all faced the same charges in a Georgia state court. 4 of the 9 counts that they were charged with were all felony murder. Now, because of the application of the felony murder rule, all 3 of these men were found guilty of first-degree murder of Ahmaud Arbery, although Travis McMichael was the only person to actually pull the trigger and physically cause his death. In my opinion, if you watch the trial, I think the prosecution did a beautiful job of laying out the facts of the case, the elements of the law, and weaving them both together to support their request for a guilty verdict for these 3 men. Now, while Travis McMichael, the person who pulled the trigger, may have been the only one here with the intent to cause Ahmaud's death, all 3 men were found guilty of first-degree murder because they all were involved in a felony while the death occurred. Specifically, the 3 men got in their truck and followed Ahmaud, even at some points running him into a ditch. The prosecutors were able to charge and prove that the men falsely imprisoned him and additionally committed aggravated assault against him in their pursuit of him with their trucks. These anchoring felonies allowed for the guilty verdict under the felony murder rule. If you watch the video of the men hearing their guilty verdicts, it may be pretty clear that the guilty verdict for murder was a surprise to Roddy Bryan. Watching the video back, he seemed a little taken aback that he was found guilty of murder. And it may be, again, because he was not the person who pulled the trigger. All he did was get in his truck and follow along. He even released a video thinking that this would show that he was helping to capture this person that they think did something wrong. But because prosecutors were able to establish that all 3 men were involved in the conduct prior to his death that constituted a felony and that he died as a result, they were all guilty under felony murder rule for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. As the 3 men sit in jail and await the sentencing for their conviction here on this state level murder conviction, they also have a federal hate crime trial that's scheduled to start in February of 2020. As the 3 men sit and await their sentencing, William Roddy Bryan has a lot of time to sit and think about how he should have stayed on his porch and minded his business. Please comment below. Let me know, what do you think about the felony murder rule? Do you think that this is something that's fair? Are you surprised by the way that this plays out in certain fact scenarios? Let me know. Don't forget to share this video. I really want to spread this message so that people know the company you keep can sometimes land you with a murder one charge. Until next time, stay safe and out of trouble.